Welcome to Lose Lips, all the things you wanted to say but didn't know how to say it. Today's topic is: has Trump lost his fan base, and is he a distraction to the Republican Party? Now, it seems that Trump has not lost his fan base completely, but he has certainly alienated some of his former supporters. Some possible reasons for his continued popularity among some Republicans are: his fan base is loyal and resistant to changing their views, even in the face of evidence and indictments. Why is Trump's fan base so resistant to changing their views? Now, some psychological explanations are: his fan base have what's known as cognitive dissonance. Now, this is the mental discomfort that arises when a person holds two or more contradictory beliefs, values, or attitudes. For example, a Trump supporter who believes that racism is wrong, but also supports Trump's racist policies and statements, may experience cognitive dissonance. To reduce this discomfort, the person may rationalize or deny Trump's racism, or change their own belief about racism. Is Trump a racist? It may certainly seem so, in not only his actions, but in words that he has spoken publicly and even through his tweets and social platform. Yet his supporters either believe his views or are brainwashed into thinking that what he says is true. In other words, his supporters don't seem to be thinking for themselves. Now, some of his fan base also may have what's known as confirmation bias. Now, this is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information that confirms one's pre existing beliefs or hypotheses. For example, a Trump supporter who believes that Trump is a great leader may selectively seek out and remember positive news about him while ignoring or dismissing any of the negative news. This definitely comes into play when we think of all of the negative press that is surrounding Trump for the past several years: tax fraud, election interference, lying, etc. And even Trump himself believes he has done nothing wrong. Yet when something of this nature happens to someone else, Trump is the first person to say the person should be jailed, stripped of their status, go through the system. Yet it is interesting that when it happens to Trump, he denies any wrongdoing. Is it because he absolutely believes he has done nothing wrong, which makes him completely narcissistic? Or is it because he believes the rules do not apply to him? You have to remember that Trump comes from a family of crooks. His father was deceitful as well, but was never into as much as Trump is and now. And you have to admit, the charges against him are staggering. It is inconceivable to think that none of these charges will stick. Some will, maybe some won't. But in the interest of the public and democracy, Trump needs to be found guilty and placed in jail. Now, some of his supporters might also have what's called motivated reasoning. Now, this is the process of reasoning in a way that favors one's desired conclusions or outcomes. For example, a Trump supporter who wants Trump to win the election may use motivated reasoning to justify or explain away any evidence of his wrongdoing, incompetence, or unpopularity. This is actually what happened when Trump stated the election was stolen from him. The election was not stolen. He lost, and he can't accept that, and has convinced his supporters to not accept it as well. Look at Marjorie Taylor Greene, who supports this theory and still denies the fact that he lost, and is even, to this day, inciting the public to start a civil war in order to get the charges dropped against Trump. Now, some of his supporters may even have what's called groupthink. Now, this is the phenomenon of conformity and harmony within a group, often at the expense of critical thinking and rational decision making. For example, a Trump supporter who is part of a social network or community of like minded people may adopt the group's opinions and attitudes without questioning them, and may even feel pressure to conform to the group's norms and expectations. This is where I believe the majority of Trump supporters lie. When you think about it, if you ask a Trump supporter why they support him, they can't give you a viable answer. They belong to a group, and if the group says so, then it is so. What are Trump's values? What does he stand for? What has he done? When Trump was in office, he was in office for himself and his rich friends and his big corporations. This did not benefit the American people, or even the majority of the American people, but his supporters did not see it as this. When you think about it, groupthink is more of a cult following where people are brainwashed to have someone think for them because they are not rational enough to think for themselves. Now, during the Capitol riot, Trump incited his fan base to storm the Capitol, and with little thinking of the consequences, they did so because it was what their leader told them to do. Many were arrested and jailed, and felt afterwards that Trump failed them because he did not come to their rescue when they needed him. But this is what Trump does. He throws people under the bus when it no longer serves his own purpose. Now, some of his group of supporters might even have what's called identity fusion. Now, this is the feeling of oneness and shared identity with a group or a leader, often accompanied by a sense of loyalty, devotion, and sacrifice. For example, a Trump supporter who feels fused with Trump may see him as an extension of themselves and may be willing to defend him against any criticism or attack. And this is what happened during the Capital City riot. Now, his fan base also sees Trump as a victim of a political witch hunt and media bias. His fan base believes this because this is what they have been told by Trump. But if anyone opened a law book or read the Constitution, one would see that there are many points for charging Trump for what he has done. There is no witch hunt. There is no media bias. What Trump has done is illegal, and he needs to account for what he has done. But in order for him to do this, he has to be brought to court and charged. Trump can't admit that he did anything wrong because this would then tell his followers that they are wrong as well. He wants to have his supporters loyal enough to try and win another election so that he can try and rid himself of these charges. The only problem is he is making a mess of things, and the Republican Party seems to be falling apart. His fan base enjoys this personality and style, such as his humor, charisma, and unpredictability. I think a lot of his fan base enjoys him due to his name, much as people enjoyed Ronald Reagan due to his name. The difference is that Reagan was a good president. He got things done for the country, not for himself. Now, Trump's fan base still follows him on social media platforms such as Twitter, where he continues to post his opinions and messages. One thing Trump has not learned is that when you are a public figure, you represent the public, and for all of his rhetoric and biased views, this casts a bad light not only on the country as not welcoming, but also on his supporters of Trump because it incites hatred and fear among both sides. However, some reason for his loss of popularity among some Republicans are his involvement in various scandals and legal troubles, such as the storming of the Capitol, the impeachment trials, and the tax fraud charges. Now, this is where I believe it gets messy. Trump has not backed down off the ticket to become the next president, and by doing so, he has taken his followers with him. This is actually disrupting the candidates who want to move past Trump and provide a better ticket. So far, this has not been achievable, and it has had disastrous results for the Republican Party. Trump has his failure to deliver on some of his promises and policies, such as building the wall, repealing Obamacare. Trump ran his platform and did not deliver once he was elected. He was a substandard president at best and showed his true colors, passing laws that benefited himself. Trump also mishandled the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic and social consequences. Trump was not a believer in COVID 19, and due to this, America had a later start in shutdowns, quarantines, as well as inoculations. 1 million people died due to COVID 19. He was also divisive and polarizing in rhetoric and actions, which have alienated some moderates, independents, and minorities. It serves no purpose to have a bigot in the Oval Office. It seems that Trump has had a significant and lasting impact on the Republican Party, both positively and negatively. Some may argue that Trump is ruining the Republican Party by driving away moderate, independent, and minority voters who are turned off by his divisive and polarizing rhetoric and actions. Also, in terms of undermining the party's credibility and integrity by spreading lies and conspiracy theories about the 2020 election and the January 6th insurrection. Also, he's facing various scandals and legal troubles that could damage the party's reputation and prospects in future elections. He's also dominating the party's agenda and resources with his personal interests and ambitions, leaving little room for other voices and visions. Now, others may actually argue that Trump is strengthening the Republican Party by expanding the party's base and appeal to working class, rural, and populist voters who feel neglected or betrayed by the political establishment. But I have to admit that Trump made lots of promises to people in the rural areas, and many farmers felt neglected and cheated once Trump did not fulfill his promises to them. But some might actually say that he's also challenging and confronting the perceived enemies of the party, such as the mainstream media, the Democrats, and the deep state. Now, this can be construed as twofold, because on one hand, Trump is for the media as long as it perceives him in a good light. But if the media turns on him, then everything is considered fake news. There are also some that believe that he's giving the party a clear and distinctive identity and direction, as opposed to being vague or indecisive. Now, if Trump is considered the poster person for the Republican Party, then it is not a good poster. All this tells the public is that the Republican Party is only for themselves and what they can benefit out of it, not anything that is beneficial for the American people. So, with all this going on, is Trump psychotic? So, now think about it. Psychosis is a severe mental disorder that affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. It can cause a loss of contact with reality, such as having hallucinations, delusions, or paranoia. Now, psychosis can have various causes, such as brain injury, drug abuse, or even genetic factors. Whether Trump is psychotic or not is not a simple question to answer. There is no definitive test or diagnosis for psychosis, and different mental health professionals may have different opinions and criteria. Now, moreover, Trump has not been formally evaluated by a psychiatrist or a psychologist, and his medical records are not publicly available. However, based on his public behavior and other available information, some mental health experts have suggested that Trump may exhibit signs of psychosis or other mental disorders, such as narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, or even delusional disorder. These experts have actually pointed out some of Trump's characteristics and actions that could indicate psychosis, such as his tendency to lie compulsively and create his own version of reality, his obsession with violence and admiration of dictators and authoritarian figures, his lack of empathy and remorse for the suffering of others, his grandiose sense of self importance and entitlement, his paranoia and mistrust of anyone who disagrees or challenges him, his impulsivity and recklessness in decision making. These experts have also warned that Trump's psychosis could pose a serious danger to himself, his followers, and the country as a whole, especially as he becomes more desperate and isolated. They have urged for his removal from the office or his evaluation by an independent medical team. However, not all mental health professionals agree with this assessment. Some have argued that diagnosing Trump from a distance is actually unethical and unreliable, and that his behavior could be explained by other factors, such as political strategy, personality traits, or cultural influences. They have also cautioned against stigmatizing mental illness or using it as a weapon against political opponents. Ultimately, the question of whether Trump is psychotic or not may not have a clear or definitive answer. It may depend on how one defines psychosis, what criteria one uses to diagnose it, and what evidence one considers relevant. However, regardless of his mental state, Trump's actions and words have had significant and lasting consequences for the American people and the world. I am sure others are looking at him now and even saying to themselves, this was an American president? Wow, what is going on in America today? Think about it. Is this the type of person we need to be leading our country? That's it for now. Thank you for listening to Lose Lips, and until the next time.